In this lesson, we're going to have some fun with jQuery. And the idea is that whenever we try to submit the form, I want to catch all of this content before it actually gets submitted to our backend and make sure that there's some content filled out there. Now, of course, within this tutorial, we've gone through the PHP way of doing it. We've also got HTML5, so we know that it is actually catching these values here in HTML5. But so depending on how you want to structure it, these are a number of different ways. You could add all of them, or you could just select one of them. I usually prefer to have multiple ways of just checking to make sure that my content isn't being submitted or isn't being spammed, and that the user is actually submitting that correct format. So sometimes jQuery is a good way to go because we can prevent that page reload and if any of these values aren't met. So let's see how we can really easily just kind of loop through to check to see if there's a value for name, email, and for this security check. Now, the one thing that we notice whenever we're using jQuery, we need to be able to search for particular form values and particular elements within our HTML. And once we can do that and isolate those elements, then we can put them to good use and pick up all the different values and make changes with them, dynamic updates to them via jQuery. So what I want to do first, I want to set up a variable. So this is going to be essentially a holder to check to see if what the value of the empty is. And so this is what we're going to use to check to see if it's empty, if the values are there. So let's do has, or we'll just call it holder value. And I'm going to start it off as false. And then if holder value, so if it's true, then we're going to return false. And we're not going to allow the user to actually submit the form. And we can actually get rid of this prevent default right now at this point. So right now, if the holder value is true, then it's gonna if it's true, then it's gonna return false. Otherwise, it's gonna allow you to submit the form. So we're gonna toggle it to be true if we find any issues with the content within the form. So let's loop through that entire document here, and we're gonna use jQuery find. So we're going to be able to find descendants of each element that match our query. And of course, we could identify them and check to see each and every one, but this is a quicker way of doing it. So we're going to loop through all of the input elements, and we're going to just make sure that the type is not equal to hidden. So because sometimes you want to pass some hidden values there, you don't want to catch that to check to see if that's empty. So going to just add that in for good measure, and we're going to loop through each one of them and fire off the function once we find one, and fire off the function. So maybe we'll just do a console log right now, or a console directory of the values that I'm finding. So the value of this. So let's see what happens now when we output our form, and open up our inspector here when within the console. So we see that it actually defaulted and it submitted because we're not actually doing anything where we're setting that value of hold value to false. So let's just do that and simulate actually finding an issue with some of the contents of the form. So refresh. And with PHP, we didn't need to refresh it, but with jQuery, because it's right within that HTML page, we got to make sure that we do refresh that content. So now whenever we hit it, we see that we return back 4 different values there. So we've got our input name here, we've got our input email here, we've got our security check value here, and we've got a last one of submit. So this one, so we already have a value set into there, a send. So we can just leave this one out, and we could just check for these values, and we see that they are coming up as there's no contents, there's no value assigned to those. So we can, just as easily as we saw this, we can price out the value that's contained with each one of those. So now when we refresh it, I'm going to just refresh it, add in some values, and so on. And when I submit it, now of course this is HTML5, so it's going to catch that value there. And now when I submit it, we see that we're picking up the values. So we've got 1, the email value, and the 22. So we want to just do a quick check to see if any of these, if the contents of this value is empty, and if it is, then we're going to set it as true. So now we can do a condition check. Do a condition if there's no value for this value, then we're going to set the holder value as true. And also what we want to do, we want to set this text danger class as, we want to toggle it so it's visible. I'm going to use the same format. I'm going to use find as well, so we can go with this. So how do you think that we can actually isolate out these classes here? So looking at the way that we've structured all of these elements, we can see that so the current one would be this, so whatever the value is that's contained within here. So I want to go up one level to the parent, which would be that one, and I want to search underneath the parent to see if there's any descendants that have a class of text danger. So that's what this is going to do here. So we're going to do this and parent. And so now we're traversing back up, and now we need to specify what we want to find. So we want to find a class of text danger. And when we find it, what we want to do is toggle it. So toggle whether it's visible or not. So let's try this out and see how this turns out. So whenever we toggle it, we see that if there's an empty value there, then jQuery takes care of toggling that value for us. So we see that it's actually, we shouldn't maybe put toggle, we should maybe put show on it, just to be sure. And because the toggling kind of worked, but it left this value here, and then we still got our PHP values showing up there. So didn't exactly work the way that I had wanted it to, because we're actually toggling opposite. So let's open this up again and make an update to this. So how do you think the best way to solve this? So maybe if we change toggle and we always want to show if there's an error there, so do you think this will work? If we enter in a value there and we submit it, and then maybe we enter in a value here, and let's see if that goes away. So it doesn't go away, so that doesn't solve it. So what else do we need to do? Maybe we could just grab all of them, all of the text danger values, and just simply hide them whenever the form is being submitted. And this way, whenever we're, so we're going to hide them all, so we know that the state coming in is all are hidden, and then this gives us the ability when we loop through and we do find one, and if the value meets this condition, then it actually is going to show that one. So do you think that this is gonna work? So let's try this out and see how that works. So refresh it. So first of all, we're going to just submit that we've got all of these values that are missing, and now when we enter it, we see that they're disappearing, because the flow of the hiding and the showing, this way it's going to work a lot better than toggle. Although toggler looked a lot simpler, we're not able to match that functionality that we're looking for with toggle. So this is the way that we can begin to set up our jQuery in order to fine-tune the presentation of doing a check to see if the values are all there and present, and if they are, then we can continue to submit that form. So let's try this out now in full. So now if we have an email address and we hit this, we can see that we didn't enter in a message. and we see that the form is submitted. It tries to send the email address, and of course, because we're on local machine, we get a failure of the mail server. But everything looks like it's functioning well. So I'm going to upload this latest version to the web server in the next lesson, and we'll try this out and just to make sure that everything is working perfectly. So that's coming up in the next lesson.